We are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 8 p.m. on June 23rd, 2024. We're doing a bit of a special edition tropical update. You can't keep a good weather forecaster down. I told myself I'd be taking the weekend off, but here we are. There have been very, very subtle up-and-comings out there in the tropical nature, and not only on the eastern Pacific side, but especially the tropical Atlantic side, and that's kind of more or less what we're going to touch on. Nothing extremely pressing, nothing immediately pressing, but just want to continue to get the energy out there, get the communication going, get that information cycle flowing. And we're going to talk tropics tonight, but as One Nation Weather has so eloquently put in the chat, 110%. We're going to start off by saying thank you very much for joining us on this Sunday evening. I hope you've had a wonderful little nudge. Give it a little nudge as we go through this live update. And if you're watching this after the live stream has concluded, that like button actually does wonders. It's pretty incredible. I didn't notice that, but you know what? I got to start advocating for the channel. We got to get this good information out there because we're going to be watching out for our frontline areas out there. We're looking at the Lesser Antilles. That is going to be the primary denominator, the common denominator of this live stream, and probably the next several live streams, to tell you the truth. I know that we still have signals that something could possibly come out of the box, something in the Western Caribbean, things could move into the Caribbean. But right now, as we've emphasized on previous updates, for my viewers out there, Windward, Leeward Islands, U.S. British Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, we're watching your general area in specific. That's going to be the primary target, the front lines, as I mentioned a numerous amount of times on this page. Let me get a sip of water because I'm starting to get getting a little excited. I'm just kidding, no. But anyways, thank you all very much for tuning in. I see the chat is already coming alive. It's a pleasure to have everyone in here tonight. Sharon Jackson, Richard Perez, Nomad Avenue 6, Mr. Man JJ, TRG Tornado. Good to see you, buddy. I caught a lot of your live stream yesterday, and that is true, guys. I noticed that earlier today. I hadn't been paying attention, but we actually hit 8,000 subscribers, so a beautiful day. Nice little tap on the shoulder for me. It's great that we're reaching even more people out there, and we're doing it at the right time. I'd rather communicate with as many folks as we can, get the information out there well in advance of anything really dire coming our way. And right now, that's kind of exactly what we're looking at. We do have a couple of things on the immediate horizon over the next 7, 10, 14 days, roughly 2 weeks, but nothing that is going to be very groundbreaking, nothing excruciating, like, hey, we really need to get ready for this. Just some things on the radar that we'll have to pay attention to. With that being said, let's see, who else do we have? Jai Laheja. Forgive me if I'm messing that up, Jai. Mr. Man JJ, Richard Perez, Shawnee Russell, good to see you. Brian Florida, USA, woo, good to see you in the chat. Joseph Kevin, my mind over your matter. Kevin Rivera, there he is. Nova Viper Dwagon. Janice Van Steenberg, thank you very much for joining us. F. Han, wow, and my thing all of a sudden popped off. Forgive me, I don't know what just happened, but I just jumped to the bottom of the chat. Girl Dev 994, do you think Central Indiana could get tornadoes on Tuesday or Wednesday? I'm worried. I've been crying. Well, I really hope that you're not stressing out that ferociously about the tornadic activity. I have not looked too heavily at the severe threat, to tell you the truth. I'm going to leave that for TRG and One Nation Weather to tell you the truth. They're more than happy to hook you up in the chat or on their channels as well. From what I have seen, though, to not derail the topic of discussion, is we're kind of more or less out of that peak severe weather season, especially as we get closer to July. Our severe weather is primarily going to be focusing more up north and more east, where a lot of our frontal systems are going to get the most, I guess you can say, robust dynamics in play. Hello, everybody else. Thank you very much for tuning in. We're going to go ahead and kick right into this. Let's get started. So we have Invest 93L that is more or less a dead stick at this point. We saw a little bit of action, with it developing, moving off the Yucatan, and then finally trying to manifest itself into something in the Bach down there, and it did not execute, unfortunately. Either that or it was another one of those situations where National Hurricane Center decided to play it on the safe side and not really issue anything for it. And I do believe that's exactly what happened with Invest 92L for a 6 to 8 hour window overnight before hurricane hunters went in their second time. I can't remember if that was Thursday or Friday. I think it was Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. Thursday, they flew in there. They found a fairly closed-off central low pressure that didn't have the greatest cyclonic spin to it, but it was definitely there. It was consolidated. The vorticity had it, on the chart, but they decided to not designate it. And To tell you the truth, I'm glad they didn't, because I was looking at the observations for southern Georgia, northern uppermost Florida, the Jacksonville area, and we really didn't see anything out of it. There really wasn't anything associated with it. I looked at the observations not only for the rainfall, but also for the winds, the wind gusts, and I remember at one point I was joking around with James over on X, and I told him, wow, we got a whopping 4 miles an hour right now at landfall up there in Jacksonville. So, truthfully, it looked great on satellite. It had the structure. It had a little bit of convection, albeit very small, a very tight core. But I personally don't think that it, it could go either way. It depends on who's working the desk. Like we've mentioned a bunch of different times, analyst interpretation. Could we have gone tropical depression? Probably. Was it anything that really would have done any damage? No. It was one of those coastal situations where we did unfortunately have 2 lives lost here on the east coast of Florida thanks to rip currents. And unfortunately, perhaps that could have been alleviated if we had just a bit more discussion going on with 92L. It goes back to that whole saying of it doesn't take a named storm for there to be issues with it. And in this case, as modest of a situation as that was, we still had catastrophic impacts in the way of lives lost. Even one life being lost in a weather situation is catastrophic in my opinion. So, no, Alberto was definitely a tropical storm. You could have gone either way with Invest 92. You could have gone depression. You could have gone PTC. They left it as is. And you know what? I'm comfortable with that, looking at it from both sides of the spectrum, looking at it from the political side of it and looking at it from the meteorological side of it. It just wouldn't have made sense to issue anything right off the coast like that. It would have been honestly poor of them to do that as opposed to just letting it ride. And you know what? I'm glad they did, because they would have false alarmed if they issued anything. This guy out here, though, AL93, completely done. We're not going to get anything out of it. Truthfully, it's not going to happen. Once again, like a lot of other sources have been mentioning, just a hellacious rainmaker, big-time rainmaker. And now we'll just have to kind of switch gears. We're going to be looking down over the Caribbean and especially the Lesser Antilles for some possible weak stuff like we saw last year with Brett, Cindy, and a couple of other older systems, ironically, also named Brett and Cindy back a number of years back before that. If you come on over to the satellite, you can see that we are finally, slowly but surely, seeing our Central American gyre go down. We still have a little bit of upper-level anticyclonic flow, area of low pressure down at the surface. That's why I'm kind of drawing the different layers of lines here. But you can see that our thunderstorm coverage is finally diminishing. It's finally going down, which is good news. Hopefully they can get a bit of a break in all that heavy rainfall that has been going on down there. It looks like Jamaica, Hispaniola, the Turks and Caicos, the Bahamas, Cuba, Cayman Islands are definitely still seeing widespread thunderstorm coverage. There's going to be a lot of leftover stuff. We're not going to see it just suddenly pop out instantly, but over the next 2 to 4 days, we should start to see the overall influence of the gyre finally shrink down a little bit, and we'll go back to just our garden variety thunderstorms. There's 93L just kind of looking like thunderstorms. You wouldn't even be able to tell that that was a tropical system out there or a tropical invest area. So it is what it is. If we switch over to this IR satellite, the reason I bring this up is we're starting to see greater amounts of wave activity. We're starting to see more and more somewhat organized and amplified waves down there. We had some vorticity fire up down there over South America, and it is now in the Eastern Pacific. And if you look, this is the area I'm looking at right here, treading off to the west, and now we have a little bit of area low pressure vorticity that's managed to make its way into the Eastern Pacific Basin. Let me change the color of the ink so I can highlight what it is we're watching for. But if you look down here over the MDR, we have 1, we have 2. This one's looking mighty fine. This one actually, if you look real close right there, it had a little bit of spin to it as well. But we have some pretty decent tropical waves making their way through the pattern. And so we're going to begin speculating whether or not we're going to see development in the MDR. We have some really good convectively coupled Kelvin waves is what a lot of our tropical geniuses out there love to identify it as. But overall, we just have that forcing aloft as our MJO goes from here to here, and we're almost getting ready to reset, so we're seeing that propagation from west to east as we ordinarily do, and so now we'll have to just kind of turn our attention, like the name of the title, or the name of the title of the video kind of predicts we're shifting attention from close to home out to the Atlantic, and we're going to start talking more about our Lesser and Greater Antilles. Regardless of development, I want to give the one disclaimer as always. We're going to see lots of thunderstorm activity for our Lesser Antilles, whether it be the Leeward or the Windward Islands, Puerto Rico, U.S. British Virgin Islands, and even obviously Hispaniola's already getting it. You can see Hispaniola already, we have a nice line of convergence right along that area, starting from the eastern tip of Hispaniola all the way back through to where 93L is. So that's a given. That's a give and take right there. It's these puppies out here that we're going to have to pay close attention to. And what I'm going to do first is walk you through why we won't see development. We're going to go the other way because I know a lot of folks out there are already saying nothing's happening. The tropics are shut down. We're quiet. It's going to be boring. So we're going to start there. We're going to go ahead and reinforce the thought process that, hey, yeah, it's going to be quiet. We're not going to see anything. So starting off right here, this is our velocity potential. You can see at the upper right portion of the chart right here that lines up with our Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the MDR. We are going to see what's left of our favorable MJO phase, and our vertical velocities out there segue out to the east and give us from 60 west and further off towards the east to about the 0-degree longitude line some favorable rising action. So with that being said, right after that, bam, you could see that we are going to see a large period of unfavorable characteristics out there. Just lots of sinking, lots of subsidence provided by the backside, the outflow from our MJO. So as you can see, there is going to be a window of time starting right about now, and we're already seeing it, even though there's nothing designated, even though there's nothing out there on the immediate horizon that the official sources are looking at. We're already seeing it. If I go back to the satellite image here, we already have much greater convection with these tropical waves. So don't get it twisted out there, ladies and gentlemen. When you hear people mentioning that we're going to see enhanced activity, that's where you have to be very careful and kind of weed out who's clickbaiting, who is genuinely hyping, and who means what they're saying. Some people can leave it a little ambiguous to get you to check out their stuff, but, regardless, we're already seeing a little bit of that enhancement because if you guys remember, we've seen a number of strong tropical waves come off of Western Africa looking like Independence Day spaceships from back in the day, and then they're gone as they ride the ITCZ. But now if you look, we have this guy that's managed to make it all the way across its trip to the MDR. We have stuff working its way through the Windward Islands right there. You can see that thunderstorm activity that just moved through the Windward Islands and is now in the Eastern Caribbean. And then this guy way off in the background here, this one here, we're going to have to watch as it propagates off towards the west, riding that 8-degree latitude line. And that's another thing I've been kind of debating with people as well. Some folks have been telling me when I shared this stuff on my X, on my Instagram, etc., they're saying, oh, but the ITCZ is lifting up. It's going further to the north, and I beg to differ. It has not moved. If you guys remember, if you rewind all the way back to when we started these tropical updates mid to late May, sure, we were a little bit further to the south, maybe 6 to 8 degrees latitude, but if you look at where the ITCZ is, our convergent zone, as well as where the waves are generally flowing east to west, we're still to the south of 10 degrees latitude. We are still definitely down below that 10 degrees, which does us favors and it gives us favors. It gives us advantages and it gives us disadvantages. Wow. There we go. I finally got that conundrum out of my mouth. The reason it gives us advantages is for everybody in the chat that's talking Saharan dust, we are, again, on the southern periphery of that. So unless these things are getting really aggressively wrapped up, we're not going to see that ingestion of dry air. And in fact, looking at how amplified the waves already are making their way from Africa all the way to the coastline of northern South America, the Windward Islands, they're not being defeated by the dry air. If they were, we would have little wispy clouds like out up in through here. We would have all that sinking air, upper-level cirrus, the sheared look, very weak thunderstorm activity, kind of like this guy up here is a wonderful example of it, even though this is a totally different feature. That's an upper low, which is something else I want to talk about. But you know what I mean? We wouldn't have these white shades, these dark reds, the oranges. These are some pretty impressive thunderstorm tops on these tropical waves. Couple of outflow boundaries out there indicating that there is some dry air intrusion, but not the most incredible. The bad news, the disadvantage of being so far to the south and with such an intense blocking pattern to the north, all this high-pressure ridging to the north, keeping us down to the south, is we're probably going to crash and burn or scrape along South America, preventing us from really developing anything. So it's a give and take. We're missing the dry air, so out there in the Atlantic, we might see look at that little yellow blip from National Hurricane Center, but as soon as we get into the Caribbean, if they stay too far to the south, they're either going to run headfirst into Central America and end up in East Pac system, or they're going to scrape through the landmass down there and nothing's going to happen. So with that being said, let's continue to move on. You can see the GFS also shows a huge area. This is a more zoomed in perspective. This only goes out to July 9th. But again, small window of opportunity for our MDR to do something from about, we'll say, the 4th of July weekend. As we get past the 4th of July holiday for us here in the United States, that's when things could shut down for a little while until they try to build back in. But we'll see. So we have that upper level forcing that's going to stop things or try to stop things. Another area that I've been watching is our TUT. We still have a very strong upper tropospheric trough out there. And what I'm looking at is this here. That could definitely dork things up pretty dramatically. It's not only going to increase our wind shear through the Caribbean, but it's also going to provide a protective blister like we saw last year as these waves, even if they do organize, let's say we do, oh shoot, we have Barrelin, who is it, Chris? I believe, I keep saying Colin, but I'm pretty sure it's Chris, right, is the C-named storm. Oh shoot, look at that, we have our tropical storms out there, but then as soon as they run into this TUT or that increased area of wind shear over the Caribbean, we're done. That's it. It's going to be it's going to be another example of Brett and Cindy from last year. If we come over to the EPS on Tropical Tidbits, is a little bit easier to point out because of the streamlines, but this is what I'm looking at right there. This is our upper tropospheric trough that extends down into the northern MDR. MDR is right here. Not too much further to the north than that, not too much further to the south than that. So again, if we stay to the south, we could try to spin something up, and there is still some leftover anticyclonic action out there in the Caribbean, so it's going to be a very finicky forecast. Are we looking at a hurricane? No, but we could potentially see a wave or two try to give us a little bit more action. If you go through the entire 12Z loop, you can see that there is some period of time where that TUT is going to weaken just a smidge, pull out of the MDR, and we're left with neutral point in the winds, anticyclone over Africa, and an anticyclone out there over the western portions of the tropical basin, and then into the Caribbean. So, there's going to be some favorable windows. It's not the most ideal environment to where you cut a wave loose and it's just going to blow up. That's not the case here, but if we can find those favorable windows, it is possible. This further reinforces what I had mentioned. This is going to be our analyzed Saharan air layer. You can see just copious amounts of very dry air. This is like, I would almost argue this is dead air, to tell you the truth, because of how just dense the dry air is. Look at the shades here. Dry, dusty SAL air mass. Look at how far into the chart we are. We have the white shadings up and through here. So very dense dry air, but notice how far to the north it is. And if we stay down to the south, we manage to miss a large majority of it. So, it's a double-edged sword. We're in a very tricky period of time right now. This is a look at the forecasted Saharan dust, and I think I'm slowly but surely getting the hang of forecasting our outbreaks, because I'm noticing as you get towards the very back end of June, you see that huge plume comes off, and if you were to look at your heights, whether it be 850, 700, 600, 500 over Africa, you can more or less see how the pattern really stirs up and starts to produce a lot more of this dry, dusty air kicking out over the Atlantic thanks to our tropical gradient, if you will, between pressure centers and height centers. So I'll show you that at another time just for the sake of time right now, but you can see that our dusty air is definitely going to get going out there, but right in between where our models are thinking we could try to see some sneaky development, it kind of gets a little more interspersed, a little bit more interspersed. We're not looking at a gigantic plume altogether. Still, again, not the most amazing environment. Right there would probably be the best chance for something to get going. In fact, it looks like right there, even the NASA dust model is thinking that something's going to take on some cyclonic curvature right there. So that's a little interesting note that there is something for July 2nd on our NASA model. Obviously, pay that really no attention. One Nation Weather. Unfortunately, now I'm out for the stream, but I might be back later to rewatch eventually. Sorry to exit. No, One Nation Weather, no worries. Thanks for joining in regardless. So you can see that there is going to be a lot of dust, but there are some favorable windows, and it is interesting to see that there are a couple of areas of spin even within the dust parameter. So that's definitely it's a back and forth. We're going to be in a very back and forth pattern. June, climatologically speaking, we don't see very many long track systems. And if we do get the occasional spin up down there in the ITCZ, they typically die in the Caribbean because we have not alleviated all our upper shear tension. We have not relieved ourselves of that trough that I was showing you. We have not broken away to just overall dominating ridging out there. So is it possible? Yeah. Is it likely? We're still evaluating. And with that being said, let's start looking at some of the models. So this is 18 Zulu GFS. You scroll through, and we are still watching for one more possible entity out there in the Western Caribbean and then into the BOC, the BOC, the Bay of Campeche. This has been trending for quite a while now, and I'll show you the other models as well. This is across all model platforms. We're seeing some area of low pressure try to trudge its way through the Western Caribbean. We might get a little AOY down there and possibly another yellow blip through the Yucatan and into the BOC. We'll see. And then from there, if you look out over the MDR, a couple of waves trying to spin up. And for my frontline folks out there, some definite tropical enhancement going on for our Lesser Antilles, particularly the Windward Islands. But we could see it across the Lesser Antilles, no matter where it is you reside, because of how expansive these systems could be as they try to consolidate but are unable to. If we come on over to our European model, we'll take a look at the King Euro everyone loves to talk about. And you see down there in the Caribbean, we get a little area of low pressure that moves through. It's not as apparent on the European model. It's a lot weaker. If you switch over to your vorticity, you can see it, but it's definitely still down there. A little bit of vorticity breaks away as it rides up northern South America into the southern Caribbean and then travels in the same general fashion as we saw on the GFS, albeit the ridge pushes it way too far to the west. So either way, if we switch back over to our mean sea level and precip, the key takeaway, if you watch down there over the western Atlantic, or I'll go to the tropical Atlantic, you can see waves coming in. There's one right there. Nice rainmaker. You go back towards the end of the model run. Here comes another one. There goes a second one right in through here. Disorganized, and then here comes another one right there. Boom. This one is the one that the European AI model continues to try to show something developing, which is very interesting. I'll even switch over to that so you guys can take a look. If you see right there, it forms into something, but then the Euro AI thinks it's going to get stretched out by our TUT. That's an indication that our TUT is probably still in play out there. Can't see it there. Let's go to our 500 millibar height anomalies. A little bit of an upper low right there. That tells me that our TUT, like I was telling you guys earlier in the live stream, is going to stop it right there. See how it starts to get stretched out? We started as a consolidated low on that IT, that convergence zone. As it pulls towards the north, we're going to see the northern apex of it stretched out, because if you remember that upper TUT, that tropical trough right there, is going to shear it apart. It's increasing shear on the front side, and it's increasing its northward tug on the back side of it. And that could be why our AI models are struggling. Not struggling, but struggling to hold it together. Again, key takeaway, though, massive rainmaker for our folks down there, and then the AI model does not want to stop there. Here comes another one, and then another one right behind there. So we're going to see a period of time where we get a lot of rain out there. We're still very, very heavily investigating if we're going to see development. The Canadian model is on the ball. The Canadian model thinks we are definitely going to see development. It has been very consistent. There goes our first wave. Windward Island impacts is June 25th. June 25th, so June 24th into June 25th, we're going to see some increased rain activity down there for our Lesser Antilles, predominantly favoring the Windward Islands, the southern half of our island chain out there, because we are being forced so far to the south by this very, very dominant high height center and our area of high pressure out there over the central Atlantic. It's just been plastered out there. You can see there goes more tropical development right there, but it falls apart as it approaches the Caribbean and then gets sheared apart. So we might try to see another Cindy Brett kind of a situation if things can form up. You notice there, we do have a closed area of low pressure. You switch over to your 850 vorticity, and it's nice and consolidated. Even up to 700 millibars, very consolidated. And look at that bad boy behind it. Even more vorticity coming together. You switch over to your Kubo Wheeze, which kind of helps to break apart. The reason I'm starting to slowly use this as I study it more is I love the fact that it helps to show us down in the lower levels where our vorticity is spinning and tightening up our vortex. But then if you look at the purple, that would be your upper level outflow. That is your outflow or your dilatation, for lack of better, well, I mean, that is the better term, or your outflow for lack of better term. So you can see we do have some pretty decent areas of vorticity moving through there, coming across. So we could possibly see some tropical impacts of some sort of nature down there in the Lesser Antilles. There goes our first one, doesn't quite make the cut, doesn't close off. Here comes our second one, does close off, begins to fall apart as it moves into the unfavorable somewhat Caribbean, and then we have another one back behind it that we'll have to continue to watch. Icon doesn't go nearly as far out. I'm on 12Z, so we can kind of see it. There goes that first wave, boom. There goes that second wave, boom. And then here comes another one. The Icon is trying to spin some stuff up too. They're starting to spin some stuff up on the Icon, and that wasn't there previously, but you can see one area here and one area there. It loses the low stamp, but there is some spinach out there, as Mike's weather page would say. There's definitely some definitive spin out there, and some of these waves are going to try to get going before we get too deep into July. So all of our models are in agreement that something is lurking out there in the MDR. The intensity and how far or long duration it is, that's the question. That's the main question, the elephant in the room. We saw a spike in our probabilities here. If you go to 72 hours, 96, there goes that first area we were highlighting on the European model and the GFS as our third possible BOC entity. At 120, we start to lose that signal. A little bit of a random flare up here thanks to a frontal boundary that's coming off of the United States. Classic June setup once again, some leftover frontal remnants. We might see a little area of vorticity undergo genesis and form a low that skyrockets off towards the northeast. Nothing to write home about. I'm not sure if National Hurricane Center will designate it. If they do, hooray. If they don't, then hooray, because it's not going to play much of a role in anyone's weather. Might throw some swells and some rainfall out there for Bermuda, but even then, nothing to really be concerned about. You go to 168 hours and notice that we're continuing to see that uptick in our MDR. We're already up to about 40 percentile down here at 192. We're sitting pretty at about 45. Creeping in, like I've been telling you guys, Windward Islands, ABC Islands, Northern South America, the Guianas, Venezuela, and the southern half of our Lesser Antilles, those Windward Island nations are the ones that are really going to have to pay attention as we move through time. And then just as we've reinforced a number of times on the channel, 65, 70 west, that's when you start to see that delineation where some of the ensemble shadows try to take it up like this, others continue it off like that. Kind of for the first time in a while, looks like that Florida is going to be right in between. We're going to get dodged either to the right or to the left, looking at most of our ensembles. But obviously, there's been a lot of fluctuation in those, so take that with a modest grain of salt. With that being said, let's get into the ensemble. So ensembles popping up, that's something down here. It could try to manifest itself. And then if you look at 150 hours, we're already seeing stuff out there in the MDR. Clear signal, decent confidence. And then like I said, we're splitting the difference. It actually looks like Florida is going to be out on its own. Looking at not main development region, mid-Atlantic states, some out-to-sea stuff a la Lee and Nigel from last year, but then a lot of them turning into Caribbean runners and some fairly intense-looking ensembles here. Now, obviously, this is a very low-end signal. We're not seeing too many ensembles actually creating intense tropical cyclones. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I guess you can count 8 with this one and 9, but that's far much later into their life cycle that I would definitely expect that's not going to happen. Those are outliers. If we switch over to easterly wave and we get rid of that pressure bias, you can see that there is a pretty solid amount. I mean, look at that. That's confident. That's definitely confident. That's a lot of ensemble members. And again, not trying to sound like a know-it-all, like I just know everything in the world. I'm far from that. Trust me, my current weather courses are teaching me that as we speak. But you can see Lesser Antilles are front lines, period. 100%, I would say 97% of the members here on this chart take it right through our Lesser Antilles in one way, shape, or form, and then it turns into divergence. From there on in. So 65, 70 west is going to be our zero barrier, but the Lesser Antilles are definitely going to get some tropical activity out of this, whether it be just nothing more than some pretty solid rounds of rain or actual tropical impacts. Regardless, our models are picking up on it. And you go back to 0Z last night, not as much of a signal. You go back to 12Z yesterday, not as much of a signal. So we are trending up. We're definitely trending up. Today was probably the most agreement we've seen of some kind of a low-end tropical depression, maybe a modest tropical storm, a disorganized tropical storm coming through that we'll need to pay close attention to. This is a look at our latest GEFS ensembles. I'm using the Tropical Tidbits version because we don't have it in on weather models, and I may not be live until 9 o'clock, so I'm just going to show you via here where we can see the different ensemble members. This is 18 Zulu. 18Z GFS showing some agreement down there in the Southern Caribbean headed up towards the Yucatan, the BOC, as you can see. Not a stellar amount of agreement, but it's definitely there, definitely. And then down there in the MDR, we're seeing our ensemble members pinging. Again, Lesser Antilles, bam. All the model ensemble members go right into that general area, and then they really diverge. They diverge very quickly with some strong stuff out there near the Bahamas. So, don't really think that's going to happen, but it is worth paying attention to. We're seeing some pretty decent model agreement. You come back to 12 Zulu, same song and dance down there in the Bach, and then down there in the MDR, Lesser Antilles, before we get a bit more of a divergent flow in all of our ensembles. In fact, 12 Zulu didn't have as strong of a signal. Canadian ensembles as well. We're seeing it track right through the Lesser Antilles. First system here, second system down here. And then we see that divergence. They're either going to drift towards the north or they're going to crash into Central America, try to get into the BOC as always. But Lesser Antilles are where we need to pay close attention to. And with that being said, that more or less wraps up tonight's live stream. What I want to kind of go into for the very tail end of this is I've been getting a lot of questions recently, whether it be in the comments or on my other social media platforms about, is it going to be dead? Is it going to be quiet? Are we closing up the tropics? I look at it from a few different perspectives. If you live in the United States, yeah, we could be seeing the tropics close down, for sure. If you're out there in the Caribbean, or if you reside on an island nation out there that is much closer to these areas that we're expecting some potential enhancement, then no, tropics are not going to be closed. So that's kind of, I feel bad because it's the very meteorologist answer. Could not, but in this case, it's a matter of your perspective. For example, like I showed you in those Euro ensembles, are we going to see action in Texas and Florida? Probably not. Probably not. Could that change? Yeah, but, probably not. So we're going to shut down for all intents and purposes. Are we going to get action down there in Central America? Maybe. Looks like there are some ensembles that push some tropical activity in their general direction. So that's a given. That's a 50-50. Then if you're looking down there for Puerto Rico, U.S. British Virgin Islands, all of our Lesser Antilles folks down there, all our friends down there who were watching us last year, yes, you're going to see tropical activity. And you see how that changes? You can kind of create grid boxes here. And, this is a big check mark. This is a 50-50. And then this is probably a big old X, depending on if the pattern shakes out and becomes favorable enough to get some of these aggressive European ensembles that track all the way through, then maybe we'll see. But if I had to rank it, I would go 10, 30, 100. And then I would go with a nice little happy medium of 70 right in through that quadrant, 30 here, 10 up here, and then 100% as we're coming into those Lesser Antilles. That's how I would break it down. 170, 30, 10, for sure. And even 10, I feel like is being very, very gratuitous. Only reason I give this a 10 is because of that first system that could try to wander up like this and do another indication or another Tropical Storm Alberto and Invest 93L. That's the only reason I'm going with 10% for that general area of the southeast and the Gulf coastline. Do I think that the Saharan dust is going to play a role? It always does. Saharan dust has been around since the dawn of time, so it's going to play a role. It always does, especially during this time of year. We will only really get rid of it once we get to the first couple of weeks of August. Then it's free reign. That's why it's the peak of hurricane season, because things naturally come into alignment and we start to see things kick off. I also was talking with someone on Instagram about the Indian Ocean monsoon, the Indian monsoon, and the correlation to systems being generated in the tropical Atlantic. And I definitely get it. That is a teleconnection. I've done a lot of research on it before the hurricane season about the Indian Ocean dipole, the Indian monsoon, the African standing wave, and the fluctuations and the ingredients that they provide that connect to the tropical Atlantic. And yeah, again, reinforced stuff. It's proven in science that, yeah, you do generally see an uptick in terms of activity when those are in favorable setups. If you have more enhanced activity in your monsoons, whether it be Africa or India or both, if you have a lot more anomalously rising air over Africa, you're going to have greater MCS activity, more vorticity to get out over the Atlantic, you get those waves. But the key takeaway is we got to stop going, and I'm seeing other channels doing this. I'm not a fan of that. Weather is a dynamic and continuously evolving specimen. Obviously, it's not alive, but it's an evolving entity on our planet. It is always in a flux. So I'm not going to say, yeah, we're done, and I'm not going to say, yeah, for sure. That's no. We have a lot of different variables on the playing field, and 2024 is definitely showing us that even though the waters are hot, even though we have all these waves, even though we have everything that could possibly equate to a Category 10 hurricane, we haven't really seen much. We've only gotten one named storm, and even that was a raggedy-looking, large, broad wave that moved into Mexico. So it goes to show there are a ton of moving pieces out here, and I never want us to put ourselves into a box and say, yep and nope, because it's going to change. It's going to change. And in this case, the way we're already trying to categorize it and say, nope, tropics are closed, that's going to be a big no-no for our friends down there in the Lesser Antilles. If I were to sit here with all you guys, even if I am a smaller channel, and say, yep, tropics are closed, Saharan dust, ain't going to happen, and then we have flooding, elevated winds, thunderstorms, tropical impacts down there in the Lesser Antilles, I would expect all those people to unsubscribe. Because I told you guys, tropics are closed, we're done, it's quiet, bust. And then now we have people getting hurt, people in harm's way because of tropical impacts. It's all a matter of where you're looking. And I've emphasized that from the very beginning, even tail end of last year, that the Lesser Antilles are going to be our front line location, our forward fighting position, or DFP out there during the tropics because of the steering patterns that we have in play. Then from there, it becomes a lot more variable. Climatology could win, and we don't see anything out there in the Caribbean. Climatology could be overruled like we saw last year, and we do get a couple of Caribbean runners that do make it through as a tropical storm. It's very, very mixed signals right now. We're not at that point in time to where everything is going to make a run for tropical development. And even then, in August, September, October, we've seen how, depending on the timing, they don't come to fruition. So that's all I got for you guys tonight. I'm not going to continue to beat the dead horse and keep talking the same thing over and over again. Lesser Antilles are our number one priority in the immediate future. And then from there on out, we can see if things quiet down for the Caribbean, for the United States, for Central America, Mexico, and so on. Or if we see some more of this wave action try to propagate through and things do line up for some favorable action. So that's about it. We'll see you again tomorrow. We're probably going to do another live stream tomorrow. We'll say the full hour, see exactly what's up and coming and what exactly decides to take shape. We're getting closer in time, so we're going to start to see what the real big picture is. Like I showed you back here, we'll switch over to our actual ensembles again. We see development start to take shape in the MDR right about there. If anything's going to happen, 150 hours out, 6 days out, so we're getting closer to that 3 to 5 day window. In fact, let's see if 18Z we can see anything out there. Yeah, see, so nothing on 18Z. 18Z does have a couple of members down there in the Caribbean. Not a huge confidence signal, so I wouldn't sweat that too much. So we'll have a much better idea as we get ready to round out the month of June. So let's get through this week. We got a new week coming right at us, and as we get into next weekend, we will see what's exactly on the horizon for our Lesser Antilles. Time zones don't play a role in naming storms at all. Time zones don't play a role whatsoever. It's all about AOR. Atlantic has its own name. The Pacific has its own name, and then the Western Pacific and the Indian Ocean have their own names or own naming list, so time zones don't play a role at all. The Nino is still neutral. The Nino is not, it's no, let's say it's no Nino. We're still in a neutral phase. We're perfectly riding that neutral line right there. Riding that 0 degree line for sure. And we've been neutral for a long time now. I would argue that early May we went into a neutral pattern. We might go into a neutral pattern into July. July, a lot of folks are forecasting that we'll see those trade winds pick up and we can get back to upwelling out there in the Atlantic. But this is one thing that I will always tell everybody. If you're brand new to the channel or if you've been following me for a little while now, this was a bust. We have busted our La Nina forecast. Granted, I know we weren't betting on a La Nina really ringing down or knocking on the door as soon as we got into hurricane season, but at the same time, we are not seeing even that creep into La Nina. We're just holding steady. We've been wandering back and forth like a little seismometer tracking the earthquakes along the front or the fault lines, just kind of wiggling and wobbling. So I would call this a bit of a busted forecast. We thought that as soon as we came down out of El Nino, we would just keep going down. And that hasn't happened. We've bottomed out. So which one get named first in a different time zone in the Atlantic? I'm not too sure what you mean by a different time zone, but Alberto was the first named storm of this Atlantic hurricane season, and that's all we've had right now. We may have missed the opportunity to get another named storm out of 92L. I saw some speculation that 93L was trying to get its act together, and we didn't disclose it, so maybe we missed names. Maybe we could have inflated our numbers a little bit and added to the hyperactive title that this hurricane season was given if we decided to punch in some numbers and say, yep, Tropical Storm Beryl and Tropical Storm Chris. But National Hurricane Center is kind of being a little hesitant. Maybe they're also seeing whether or not, do we want to name this stuff now or do we want to see what happens later in the year and wait for the classifications when they matter. Because if we were to name these first 3 cyclones, they would have been wasted. If I'm being honest with you, Alberto, bad, massive flooding, not taking it away, but not the most grand of tropical systems. We were going to get flooding regardless because of the gyre and all of our upward vertical motions out there fueling our thunderstorms and our consistent thunderstorms. And so I can get why they don't want to just start slapping names on everything, because then at the end of the day, when we get to November, December, we slap the name on almost everything. Yes, people are going to say, look at that. We did have a historic hurricane season. But then when you look at the numbers and you look at the stats, it's like, well, we were naming every low pressure out there. And only the real hurricanes that occurred during X period of time, you know what I mean, hypothetically speaking. So that's all that I have to say about that. And if you guys, we have a lot of viewers in here tonight. We've had about 1,200 people view the live stream, and we have 65 likes. So if you're currently watching, please go ahead and give that like button a nudge before we round out the live stream. Before we close out here, it would mean a tremendous amount, guys. If you can nudge that like button and really help get that algorithm on our side so we can continue pumping out this information and getting it across to everybody out there. And the more we get the like button nudged and the more we can nudge this information out there, the more it'll be received where it matters most, like the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, all of our greater Antilles out there who really need this information. Because I'm noticing there's a lot of people emphasizing that the tropics are going to close and it's going to be quiet. I would not say that. I would not say that because it's a matter of perspective. We talked about it, I think, on Friday. You guys don't really care about the numbers. The numbers are not going to, at the end of the day, if you lose your home, if you lose friends, if you lose loved ones, if you lose property, you're not going to give a rat's behind about the numbers. You're going to care more about the intensity, the information, the warning, the lead time. And in this case, we're trying to get ahead of what could possibly be coming towards our Lesser Antilles. They're our island neighbors. And so they matter. They're people too, and they have lives, they have property, they have loved ones. We're all in this together. Everybody out there in the tropics, we're all trying to just conquer the Atlantic, the hurricane season, one step at a time. And that's what I want to emphasize on this channel more than anything, on all of my social media, is we can talk numbers and have fun placing bets on who won the game of forecasting total named storms. That's outstanding. But right now, let's focus on who's going to be receiving what. And then we can have fun playing the lottery in November or December. We can do a fun little numbers game for Christmas after everything is all said and done. But we should really focus on where the impacts are going to be moving. Which one get named first in a different time zone in the Atlantic? I'm not too sure what that question is. I really don't understand the question. Different time zones. The time zones don't play a role at all in the way we name storms. They don't. But in terms of which one gets named, if there are 2 different or 3 or 4 different entities on the game board, a lot of it is going to come down to analyst interpretation. If we can't get recon aircraft into a system, they're going to kind of go off of satellite and radar imagery, surface analysis, buoy data, ship reporting. I'm trying to think. What are you talking about, clipped wing? Don't start. I'm not hyping anything. The islands are going to see bad impacts. The islands have been seeing bad impacts. Please don't start with the H word. There has been no hype in this. In fact, we started the live stream talking about how there's nothing going to happen. So I don't know what you're talking about. They don't matter. In my opinion, they don't matter. They really don't. And that's from my military perspective. If we're going to talk 30 named storms in June and we have 1 storm, then they don't matter. Because if you're thinking 30 named storms and you're trying to close out the hurricane season in June, we're not even through the first quarter of the football game. Like, give it some time. We can start talking numbers towards the back end of the hurricane season. I don't know where you're talking. I'm so sick of that. There's never anything on here that I say that is unrealistic. In my opinion, and now I'm going to start going against the grain here, and I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm going to anyways because I really want to communicate to you guys my perspective. When I hear the word hype, I think false. False. When I say hype, I envision immediately from my perspective and my intellectual brainwaves, if I hear the H word, I imagine tropical wave, but they're making it sound like a Category 5. That's hype. You're lying. You're lying. And when I see people say I'm hyping, I look at it as you're saying I'm lying. And that's why I get a little frustrated, because I'm not lying to you guys. I'm never lying to you guys. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Lesser Antilles are going to have to pay close attention as we can finish out the MJO phase that is currently propagating across our Atlantic. All the models are showing it. You're either going to get a lot of rainfall in a short period of time, or you're going to see actual organized tropical activity. But regardless, you're going to feel impacts. You're going to feel some action. Period. Then from there, it becomes a lot more sporadic. If anything will make it into the Caribbean, if you're going to see increased rain chances, if we're actually going to get a named storm, we shall see. We're still far enough in time to where we're just projecting advance warning. That's why I say please give that like button a nudge so we can get that information out there and start preparing folks who may not be paying attention, because a lot of the big channels are saying nothing's going to happen. It's going to be quiet. And I don't want to say that. If you live in Florida, then heck yeah, it's going to be quiet. If you live out there on the front lines like we've been saying, then heck yeah, it's not going to be quiet. And I'm not going to sit here and try to bottle everybody up into my own backyard and say, well, it's sunny here in Central Florida, the tropics must be quiet. That's false. That's hype. The opposite direction. Do you think the ITCZ could lift around August or September, or would it stay? It will definitely lift around that time, because that's when we start to see our anticyclone over the Atlantic slowly but surely work its way back. It starts to break down, and that's what has me concerned for August, September, October. I'm not so sure we're going to see such a huge decrease in its amplitude to where everything is suddenly going to go out to sea, because right now we're seeing every single feature move through the Lesser Antilles and crash into South America or Central America. That's how strong that ridge is. Everything is moving across the Atlantic due west. Exaggerating the potential for a tropical wave to develop into something more than is realistic. That isn't hype. That's not hype. And how do you even exaggerate the potential? I've never once said that it's definitely going to happen. I've never once said that. I never said, and how do you even exaggerate the potential? You forecast the potential. There's no way to exaggerate a forecast. The only way you forecast the exaggerate, now you're even losing me, unless I'm just too tired and I can't think about that. Exaggerating the potential for development. I don't really see how I'm exaggerating development. I've been saying from the start of the video that either nothing's going to happen, and I'm going to show you why we could see nothing, and then I'm going to show you why we could see something. I literally started in the most unexciting manner and brought you into, but this is why we could and should pay attention. I don't get it. I don't get it. I mentioned Pimpin' 2033. We're looking at about June 25th to June 27th is when that first tropical wave is going to start moving through the Windward Islands. And you're just going to see back to back to back again wave. So I don't get it. I really don't get it. I don't understand. It's a give and take in this situation. It's going to be a very tough forecast. I even wrote that into my, my description for this video. There's no need to be nervous right now. There's definitely no need to be nervous. That is for certain. Like I said, you're going to definitely see some impacts from rain, not intense, but increased thunderstorm activity, but we don't know for certain if anything's going to take on a name. We really don't. It seems as if some of our models are determined to get development out there, others not so much, but if you look at our AI model and our European model, we'll go back to the regular Euro at 12 Zulu, you can see that there is some stuff out there. Look at that vorticity. That's a very, very nice tropical wave right there for sure. Right there. So I really don't know exactly what's going on. People are on to him. People are on to me. Bruh. First of all right, no, actually, I'm not even going to answer that. I'm not even going to answer to that. People are on to me. Like I'm some kind of trickster. This whole YouTube channel is built off of tricking and all that stuff. You're right, Greg. You're definitely right, for sure. But, anyways, so yeah, my forecast still stands. And if you don't want to trust me because there's people in the chat that say otherwise, you can look at the models yourself. I have full faith and confidence that you guys are all intelligent individuals. And if you don't want to listen to me, then you can go into the Tropical Tidbits. You can go to weathermodels.com. You can go to National Hurricane Center, look at their analysis. You can go to College of DuPage. You can go across the weather spectrum and find a website of your choice that you love the interface. It's user-friendly. Tropical Tidbits is my number one. A lot of folks far and wide really utilize Tropical Tidbits. And, King Euro right here, we're going to see some waves. There goes one right there. Like I said, I forget who it was in the chat that just asked, but there it is right here in the Windward Islands, right around June 25th. Then shortly after that, we get another little weak wave that moves through. Nothing too intense right here. It's very hard to see because our trade winds accelerate. And then at the back end, we see something trying to sneak out. And in fact, it almost looks like the Euro wants to develop that just beyond this model run. So we'll have to see exactly what 0Z looks like and what 12Z looks like. I'm not making myself look like anything because, first of all, I come from a different background from civilian weather. It's military weather. So when people tell me that I'm hyping it, again, I'm going to repeat myself. When I see the H word, it tells me that there's people in my chat who think I'm lying. There's a big difference in any situation. This is anything. You're in a car accident. You're at the gym. You just robbed a store. You just fought somebody. You're forecasting the weather. There's a big difference between misunderstanding and inaccuracy versus lying. And when people comment or people tell me in my chats that I'm lying, I do get defensive because I would never come on here and lie to people. What do I gain from lying to you guys? Again, I'm going to tell you and I'm going to praise all of you. You're smart. You're all intelligent people. If you guys thought I was lying, no one would watch my channel. There are some people out there who love that stuff. They really do. They feed those channels that love to just talk entertaining weather and try to talk about everything that's bad in the world. And that's not what we're doing here. I'm trying to get people geared up. You go all the way back to January, February, March, then I've been talking specifically about our Lesser Antilles. Those are my people out there. I had a lot of you guys out there who subscribed to the channel during Hurricane Tammy. There were folks who were playing my streams in the Lesser Antilles from Hurricane Tammy last year. They resonate with me. I have family in Puerto Rico. That's a soft spot for me. So even if it doesn't look like there's going to be a major storm or anything like that, I still take care of those people out there, and I want all this information to get across to them as much as possible because they're living, surviving, grinding just like we are, and they deserve it. Well, actually, it's only you and only you who have been saying that. And I know you're who it is that I'm talking to right now, Clipped Wing, in the chat. No one else is saying it. No one else is saying anything. In fact, I'm thankful that a lot of folks in this chat are defending me because they've been around long enough to understand. So that's one thing. There really isn't a lot of people out there saying it. It just bothers me that there's always that select individual who, for starters, will come in here and they don't want to have a meteorological debate. That's the thing, too. I'm going to throw that out there. Folks can come in and tell me I'm wrong. Just tell me why I'm wrong. That's the kicker. Come in and talk some science with me. Talk some information. Talk education. I'm all about learning. I'm constantly learning from you guys. I'm constantly learning from my studies, constantly learning from my work that I do, and I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to hear why I'm wrong, because if I'm wrong, I want to get it right. I don't just come in here and tell me you're wrong and that's it. It's like, well, tell me why. Tell me what I'm missing. Give me the other piece of the puzzle that I haven't put into place yet. So this way, next time, then let's do it. What do you see then? I'll give you 60 seconds. I know that slow mode is on, but tell me, what do you got? What do you got? Where am I wrong? We're going to have, this is my forecast. I'm going to lay it out again. Tropical waves are coming. We have really good Kelvin wave forcing. Our vertical velocities, thanks to the last phase of our MJO, are going to give us a shot at getting a Brett Cindy type of scenario out there in the MDR. Period. What we're still speculating, and I've said it from start to finish, is whether or not we will see development, organization, a named storm. That is where things become a lot more difficult. But we are going to see increased activity. It's on the satellite. So, yeah, I got to get off here. I really do. But I'd love to hear it. Where am I inaccurate? I would definitely love to hear it. What am I missing? What am I not looking at? Because it makes sense to me in the, from the science. I even mentioned that Our waves may not even do anything because we have a lot of dust out there. We have our tropical upper tropospheric trough that's going to be hanging out, might pull to the north, a little bit of anticyclonic action that may hold in place. But in terms of anything really getting through the Caribbean, we don't have a whole lot of reliability on that. We just don't know. That's way too far out. Way too far out. So Lesser Antilles are my number one priority. I said it. 100% chance we're going to see some sort of an influence on your weather. From there, it goes down to our 70 split, our 30 split, and then our 10 split for the United States. In Southeast Florida, how worried should I be? You shouldn't be worried at all, Pierce. Don't be worried at all right now, definitely. Definitely don't be worried. You'll know when to be concerned, but never be worried in a situation like this. It could be. All right, well, we didn't get anything out of that. So with that being said, we're going to rein it in, guys. And Silver Steel S, thank you tremendously for that $10 donation. Let me go back and acknowledge that. I'm sorry I missed it in the first place. For those of you watching, I'm going to try my best. Greg D54, I'm totally in line with you. I need to stop letting it get a rise out of me. But like I've said before, when I hear that H word, I don't look at it as I'm being inaccurate. I'm not telling the story. I look at it as people are coming in here saying that I'm giving you wrong information. That's what it is. That's why I struggle. It's so hard to maintain a demeanor because weather has been a passion of mine since I'm 4 or 5 years old, and I aspire to get it right, especially when I have people watching. So the last thing I'm going to do is risk my credibility as a human being, as a military and civilian weather forecaster, and an up-and-coming degreed meteorologist. Why would I do that? I'm going to jeopardize my entire career. Why would I do that? Common sense. I know common sense is a bit of a difficult thing out there on the globe nowadays, but I'd like to think I retain a little bit of it. So, all my future employers, including the military, can see these videos. So if they see me doing the wrong thing, they're going to come after me. It's that blatant. So I don't know. I don't know what I have to gain by being ridiculous. Pedro Rivas, that is actually a good request. I should start incorporating more Spanish subtitles. That's definitely a big thing. I forget about that. I need to get someone who can translate on here, a way to translate everything. But anyways, we were way over time. We went way over, and that's a big no-no on my part. I had to keep a schedule, and now the night's going to be a little behind. So please, if you could, despite that last-second tirade trying to, I don't know. I'm not even going to get into that, but thank you all very much for watching. If you could give that like button a nudge, just a gentle nudge, that'd be amazing. Thank you, everybody who has been supportive of the channel. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Let's try to get this information out to particularly our nations out there in the Lesser Antilles, my Puerto Rico friends out there, the U.S. British Virgin Islands. I know I have a number of people watching from out there as well. And we're going to have to pay attention before things shut down. I really do think that there's going to be dead space in July. I really do. With what's going to be coming around and how bad our negative velocities are going to be, our downward forcing is going to look like right around July 4th. And from then on, we're probably going to be fighting an uphill battle to get anything out there. So whatever could possibly be trying to form up, it's going to have to do it, and it's going to have to do it in a timely manner, because if we lag and sit around, then we're not going to have the opportunity. Yeah, that's exactly what we were just talking about, Alex Baller. Signal is up and coming, but there's a lot of entities, or there's a lot of dynamics that are going against it. So it's going to be a tricky forecast. It's going to be a very tricky forecast, but I'm very keen to see what our European model and our GFS model do after a little bit, because that does look like it's trying to get something going there, the very tail end of our European model. And if we continue to see the agreement that we are on our ensembles, we might get a couple of operational runs that start singing the same tune. So we'll see. Again, if we can get some kind of action out there before we go past July 4th, July 5th, then maybe we'll get something to get far enough out ahead of all that bad stuff that we could get a little development. But once we go past July 4th, July 5th, that's kind of the deadline. I really do think that's when things are going to shut down and we're going to quiet down for a while. I mean, that's just, incredible anomalies that are going to be forcing things in the other direction. We don't need to, or we don't want that. If we're looking for tropical activity, that's not going to do it. All this African standing wave is definitely still in place, so our waves are going to continue to try to do something. Indian Ocean monsoon looks like it's going to get started as well. Our favorable velocities are starting to tread off towards that westward direction, or would it be eastward? I guess eastward direction, westward direction. The Indian Ocean the Indian Ocean monsoon is going to get going soon. That could play a role in our future tropical activity once we get past this large area of quietness. July was quiet last year too, if I'm not mistaken. We went very quiet in July. I believe we were very quiet in 2022. July was a silent month. July naturally just is a month that's very hit or miss. It's extremely hit or miss. So we'll see. We still have a window of time to where our waves are going to do their thing. They could try to spin up on occasion, one, maybe two of them. We have decent signals that tell us where to pay attention to. Now it's just a matter of paying attention. Hey, you're right. I like that username. Hey, Clara, I'm glad that you love the community for sure. That means a lot. Christine, thanks for the great information. Azara, you're very welcome. Alden Morgan, just started watching your vids. Good stuff. Glad I could catch you live. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. I hope a couple of the folks who've been commenting on my most recent live streams have made it in here. So that's awesome. We'll have to see exactly what shakes out over the next 2 weeks. The next 2 weeks are going to be very pivotal. If we don't get anything, then that's game over for at least a little while. It looks like from July 5th, July 6th, right up until the very back end of July is going to be very, very quiet. And that's when we're really going to have to fend off a lot of the folks who are trying to cancel the hurricane season. We saw it last year during an El Nino. El Nino did not stop all of our stuff from suddenly popping off as we got to the end of July and into August, and then it was just game on from there. Went all the way down to T. We didn't get to V, but we got all the way to T. So it goes to show you can get a lot of named storms all at once. That's why I really encourage folks, stay away from the numbers. Don't worry about the numbers. We got to watch the activity first and see what really plays out, and then we can talk numbers after the dust settles. I don't know how the whole hype conversation started from me mentioning that. I really don't care. Like James Spann says, I don't give a red rip about forecasted numbers. When we're riding the hurricane season out, I'm paying attention to what's coming, not how many storms I can count. You know? Eyewall Addict, no problem. I get it, for sure. But all right, guys. We'll talk to you again very soon. I got to get going. Willow's starting her crying. Until next time, we'll see you tomorrow. Please drop a comment in the comment section if you have any questions, comments, or concerns on this live stream, anything about the Lesser Antilles, the Greater Antilles, or even your neck of the woods in the United States. We'll see what happens. Please consider hitting that subscribe button. Make sure your notifications are turned on, even if they are a little bit latent from the YouTube. Sometimes they'll send them out late, or feel free to reach out to me on my Instagram, my X, my TikTok, and we can talk a little bit more behind the scenes and, kind of shoot the breeze about weather or anything else. Like my Mind Over Your Matter said, please make sure you hit that like button, nudge the like button, give it a nice little gentle nudge. Let's get the likes up, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Probably do a evening live stream tomorrow to make up for today. I got a lot of studying to do. I'm into the weather courses that are very physics and calculus driven, and I literally have, no kidding, a bunch of different notebooks and textbooks on either side of me that I really need to dig into and wrap my mind around, because I've never been good at math. So wish me luck. There's a difference between forecasting the weather and understanding the way the forecasts work, and that's kind of where I'm getting into now. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be good. I think that'll bridge the connection between my forecasting capabilities and what I give you guys here on the channel. Have a wonderful rest of your night. I hope you had a great weekend, guys. Until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.